The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Phil Goff.
Phil Goff joins us once again this morning, leader of the Labour Party, of course. Good morning to you, Phil.
Good morning, Wammo.
Of course, on the back of a big week attacking the government on their mining proposals, and also in a week where you managed to make it out to Great Barrier Island.
Yeah, well, I thought it was important to go out to Great Barrier. That's one of the areas, part of the 7,000 hectares of formerly protected conservation area that they're planning to dig up. And nobody had talked to anybody over on the island about it. So we went across, we talked to the community board, we talked to a number of people on the island. Not everybody thinks the same there, but they made it quite clear that the majority of the people on the community board and the majority of people on the island are against the mining. Why would you dig up the areas that are set aside and protected because they're the most beautiful, the most recreationally important, the most environmentally sensitive areas? Why would you do your mining there rather than mine the minerals that are outside of those protected areas? And of course, 60% of all of the mineral wealth still not being exploited is outside those sensitive areas.
Do you think that the Great Barrier is just part of the politics of this story, and in fact the government probably has no intentions of mining on Great Barrier, but it will it'll use it to say, look, we were going to do this, but look, we won't do it here, but we will do it over here, and that'll make people feel better?
Well, they could be being Machiavellian about it, or it could just be a shambles. The whole thing and the way it's been done is a shambles. Jerry Brownlee talking about it's only a postcard on Eden Park, and then suddenly it's 3,000 times the size of Eden Park, the area that's going to be dug up, saying that there's $4.3 billion worth of gold on Great Barrier, and then I read the consultant's report and it says $1.28 billion. That's only a 300% exaggeration. But look, I think in part it's a shambles in the way that it's been dealt with, Wammo. In part it is a bit Machiavellian, because what I found in a question to the House is that they had been talking to the mining interests before the election. Yeah. They just hadn't bothered to tell New Zealanders about it in the election campaign. So suddenly they came out with something that wasn't on their agenda. Nobody suggested for a moment before the election that they'd be mining the areas that there was bipartisan agreement in Parliament on that should be protected. So I think it's been dishonest, and I think it's been badly handled. And, when even a couple of the key National Party people like Nikki Kay and John Banks come out and say they don't think it's a good idea, you've got to wonder where the government's head's at.
See, it is actually stuff like this that really get people, that give politicians a bad name, really. Because when a government comes in and say they're going to campaign on one thing and then they do another, are there any rules around campaigning and putting into policy things that you didn't campaign on?
Well, apparently not. GST was the classic example where John Key looked down the barrel of the camera during the election campaign and said National will not be increasing GST, and now they've announced that they're going to do it. The mining is a second example. I think that it does produce cynicism amongst people who are voting. I think one of the achievements, actually, of the last Labor government was that Helen Clark said right at the beginning of the thing, these are our pledges, this is what we'll do. And I don't think that accusation was levelled against the Labor Party in government, but it's certainly been part of the practice of the key government.
Because voters can't prepare for what a party says that they can't prepare for things that aren't mentioned at all, that aren't pledged.
No, well, the worst thing to do is to do what you promised that you weren't going to do. They did that over GST. The second worst thing to do is to tell the lobby groups, the vested interests, the mining companies, well, this is what we're going to do, but then not tell the public, because that's equally dishonest.
And I just wonder about the politics of this, because the national government would know that this policy, even for most of their own voters, wouldn't be very popular. In fact, there was a Sunday Star Times poll on the weekend that says 1 in 6 national voters have been turned off. So why are they doing this in their first term? When I would have thought they would have waited for their second term when they've got more of a mandate.
Well, I think if they get a second term, you'll see a whole lot of other things that they've vaguely signalled, like the privatisation of the electricity companies and the water companies. that will certainly happen then.
But you know the game, you know the politics game. What are they doing?
Oh, I think they think that they've done so well in the polls that they've become arrogant twice as quickly as any other government might ever have become. They think they can now get away with walking on water, that they can do these things, and there won't be a backlash. But you know, there are tens of thousands of New Zealanders that really do appreciate the Coromandel Peninsula. They holiday there, they have their recreation there. We don't have national parks in Auckland, but we do have protected conservation areas like the Coromandel, and I think they've underestimated what the backlash of Aucklanders, of people from the Waikato and the Bay of Plenty will be for those that really value that area. I think there's another argument, Wammo, too, that you shouldn't overlook, because we have to worry about economics, we have to worry about growth. But one of our biggest industries in New Zealand, in fact the second biggest after dairy, is tourism. It employs 185,000 New Zealanders. It earns $21 billion a year. And the branding that we've got and the strength of our promotion has been 100% pure. We're now getting things like The Economist, the British newspaper The Guardian, the New York Times, all saying 100% pure, that's dishonest. They're not. This is a country that is about to mine its most protected, its most beautiful conservation areas, and that will hurt us. And tourism is sustainable, and of course mining is just short term.
Phil, how do you balance the Labour Party's anti-mining stance with the roots of the Labour Party from the west coast to the South Island, from the town of Blackpool, from the old mining towns?
Well, first of all, we're not anti-mining. Mining has a place in New Zealand. And, you know, under Labor we hugely increased, for example, the amount of petroleum that was being produced by this country. It's now our third largest exporter. We allowed mining in some conservation areas that weren't in the protected category, the Schedule 4 category, like Pike River coal, and we did that by putting very stringent environmental standards. But we said, look, Schedule 4 was introduced by a national government. There was bipartisan agreement. These are the areas that should be simply no-go for mining. We'll keep the mining out of those areas, but with strong environmental standards, we'll allow mining elsewhere, and we did that. So there's no contradiction. It's just a matter of common sense, really.
Well, I'm not saying contradiction, but there are a group. There is a population on the South Island, the west coast there, that might depend on these mines for future jobs.
Yeah, but the great irony with the West Coast is there were a number of people that bitterly opposed the stopping of logging on the West Coast. But on the West Coast, the tourism has become probably the biggest employer of any enterprise. It's long-term, it's sustainable, it employs people, and the money largely stays within New Zealand. Mining is short-term, it's not sustainable, and the money largely goes to mining companies that are owned internationally.
Phil Goff, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Wammo.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Labour leader Phil Goff there with us this morning.
You could try looking on the